Note before you begin, all of the suspension component hardware is yield to torque or stretch nuts and bolts. Porsche considers these single-use only and recommends replacing all hardware with new when reinstalling. Begin by safely raising and supporting the vehicle and removing the rear wheels. Please see our article and videos on safely raising and supporting your 991 Gen 1 for additional assistance if needed by following the link provided at the end of this video. Remove the drop links where they connect to the sway bar, blue arrow, and to the wheel carrier, red arrow. Use a T30 torque to prevent the threaded link from turning and a 16mm wrench to remove the old collared nut. You must replace this nut. The upper mounting point on the wheel carrier is beside the tow arm, red arrow. Use a T30 torque and an 18mm wrench. You're going to need to first loosen and then remove the 32mm center wheel nut, green arrow. This is torqued on with over 300 foot-pounds of pressure. If you do not have an impact gun, have a helper step on the brakes while you break this loose with a breaker bar and a pipe extension. Once loosened, remove the brake caliper and rotor, blue arrow. Please see our articles and videos on brake caliper and rotor replacement for additional assistance if needed by again following the link provided at the end of this video. Next, remove the parking brake assembly and electronic parking brake actuator, red arrow, along with the dust shield and the wheel speed sensor and cable bracket from the rear of the carrier. Again, please see articles and videos for all of these procedures by following the link provided at the end of this video. Remove the axle nut and use a 3-arm spreader to push the axle out from the axle flange. You will need to support the axle from the rear, but I find it's just easier to get it out of the way by removing it completely. You can do that by following the link at the end of this video and seeing our article and video on rear axle removal. Use a 16 and 18mm wrench and remove the nut, blue arrow, and bolt, red arrow, from the wishbone arm. Remove the shock from the wheel carrier, red arrow. Use a 27mm socket and T55 torque and remove the nut and bolt for the shock mount. Do not lose this nut. It has a sleeve built into it, red arrow, and the shock will not function correctly without it. Slide the shock off of the carrier. The carrier will probably settle at this point, so make sure you do not pinch your fingers, red arrow. Use a 21mm wrench and a 19mm socket and remove the nut, red arrow, and bolt, blue arrow, for the forward diagonal arm. With the lower control arms disconnected, I like to support the wheel carrier with a jack before disconnecting the upper hardware. The upper control arms connect to the carrier by a series of 18 and 19mm nuts and bolts, red arrows. Remove the 18mm bolt from the tow arm to carrier, blue arrow. Remove all of the control arms from the hub and it is free. Do not let it drop. It's not heavy and it can be handled by one person. This is what you have left with on the chassis. Do not remove or loosen the control arms from the chassis or side carrier, or you will need to replace all of the hardware. You can now take the hub to your bench for work. Installation is the reverse of removal. Make sure the suspension is level with the floor before torquing. Torque the diagonal arm and control arms and wishbone to wheel carrier and mount to 90 Newton meters or 67 foot-pounds and then an additional 90 degrees. Torque the drop link to sway bar to 40 Newton meters or 34 foot-pounds and then an additional 30 degrees. Tightening torques for the rear axle. Torque the axle to transmission side with the M10-1 fine thread to 90 Newton meters or 67 foot-pounds. Finally, torque the nut on the end of the axle to wheel carrier to 460 Newton meters or 340 foot-pounds. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out another video in this series.